For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book. Not just Revelation, the book. God, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. Oh, maybe that's why so many of us are sick. Surprise, surprise, isn't it? Verse 19, and if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. So God seems to take a very, very dim view to these translations that I've just read. The American Standard, the Message, Young's Literal, the Good News, and the rest. There are 400 of them. We could spend all night just reading out the various translations. You see, excrement was always regarded as unclean, and the eternal God told us how to deal with it. Of course, we know better. We always do. We know a better way. So we put it into our water systems. And then we attempt to clean the water and recycle it and drink it. But that's not what God said we should do. It says in Deuteronomy 23:12, thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad. Verse 13, and thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. Ooh. Deuteronomy 23:14, for the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of the camp to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. Oh dear. So just the way we conduct ourselves, God is saying, I can't even walk through there, that's unclean. Not to mention the fact that, as I said, we stick the excrement into the water system, and then we promptly sit around telling us that we can, convincing ourselves we can purify it. Now, I mentioned that our detractors run to Paul. So let's take a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So Paul is trying to tell the people here, look, you know, in Bible study, you always have to take the context. The context might be within a few verses, it might be in the chapter, it might be the whole book, like Galatians. You read the whole book of Galatians, all 6 chapters, whether it appears so or not, are referring to circumcision, being a heart matter. So here we are told here, Paul is trying to say, look, things sacrificed to idols, you know, the idols are nothing that's going to contaminate the meat. That's what he's talking about. It says in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 18, behold, Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? Verse 19, what say I then, that the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. So Paul is saying, look, this is what's going on. This is what those Gentiles outside there are doing. But you don't have to fear it, okay? They're worshipping demons. But in verse 21, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. As I said, we are in Passover week, so very, very fitting. Verse 22, do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Then he goes on to say, all things are lawful to me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. And then he goes on to say, for the earth, verse 26, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. 1 Corinthians 10:27, if any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, and you be disposed to go, whatsoever is set before you eat, asking no question for conscience sake. Now, is that telling us they can put stewed dog and rats on the plate and you have to eat it? Is that what that's telling us? Of course it's not. It's talking to us about things that are edible but are being sacrificed to demons. He's saying, look, when you go into the shambles, the marketplace as it was known, don't worry too much about the origin of this meat. Because, once it's been killed and bled properly, it's not full of blood and everything, it's okay, you can eat it. You see, in verse 28 it explains it. But if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not for his sake that showed it. Now, if somebody comes up to you and says, well, look, here is this lamb, we want you to eat it. We want you to eat it because it's sacrificed to idols. You are going to be blessed because you eat it. You have to refuse it. Because it's no longer just a lamb. The connotation is that you are participating in the sacrifice to idols. If when you were eating, you didn't know, you just put it out there and there was no fuss, it was just a bit of meat, that's fine. But the minute somebody starts to make an issue out of it and say, well, look, boy, you need to eat this. This is what we sacrifice to our gods, and this is going to make you virile and puerile and senile and whatever. I'm being facetious, of course. Eat it. Because Paul is saying, no, don't do that. He says, conscience, I say not thine own, but of the other. So it is for concern for the other person that you wouldn't eat it. It's not because it's going to do you any harm. It's not going to do you any harm. We've done a video on food, saying toxic food, saying pray over your food that it's blessed, because we're in such a situation now that most things are toxic. You see, in 1 Timothy it goes on to say that coming up to in the latter times, that one of the doctrines of devils is those who are forbidden to marry and commanded to abstain from meats, which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving. Then it goes on to say, for every creature of God is good, and nothing to be refused if it be received with thanksgiving. What every creature? Every creature that is good for food, of course. It's not just every creature that is good and not to be refused. He didn't say, oh, suddenly that which was unclean is now clean.